If there is a group of people in the present who should not be strangers to gaslighting, it is Christians. Now, I want this segment to be for Christians, but also more broadly for the general public, because I think if you're an honest, at least intellectually honest person, you'll agree with this statement that there is a double standard in society, specifically in the media, when it comes to Christianity. Just today, if you go on Google and you look at where their logo is in the header there, they'll have some picture of some LGBTQ activist or some other kind of left-leaning intersectional activist. But the question comes, have you ever seen a Christian saint celebrated in that space? Maybe a Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was responsible for trying to assassinate Hitler because he felt like it was his moral duty to try to get rid of such an evil man. Have you ever seen any saint, any Christian celebrated in that space? And the answer is no. And so we are very used to, as Christians, gaslighting in the public and the double standard that is present in the public when it comes to Christianity. The media very often is used as a tool to try to dismantle and deconstruct the faith, even though it is the very thing that provided so much of the great things that we experience here in the American West. So while the media wishes to chisel away at the foundation underneath their feet, we as Christians stand back and ask why. And that is no different here in the case with this documentary about famous Hillsong New York City pastor Carl Lentz. I was very anxious about seeing this documentary because it marks the first time that Carl has spoken out since he was fired and since his multiple affairs were exposed. Now, I thought that this would be interesting just to look at kind of the institution of Hillsong Church and what was going on there and maybe see some things that I hadn't seen before. But more importantly, I was interested in hearing from Carl. Would we see kind of the contrition about what got him in the situation that he was in? Would we see some genuine, self-reflection about his actions and that kind of thing? Or would we see essentially just a car crash, just one big, disgusting, ugly event that you kind of can't keep your eyes off of? And that's essentially what I walked away with this documentary thinking, is that it was exactly a car crash. And I kind of expected that, but I didn't quite expect it to be as bad as it was. So, when you're driving and you see a car crash, you don't want to look too much at the spectacle on the side of the road, but your eyes are strangely drawn, let's be honest, to what's going on and is everybody okay over there? But unlike most of the car crashes you see, the car doesn't explode while you're watching and driving by. And that's what happened here in this car crash. So it went from bad to worse with this documentary. And it started with this. And I want to kind of pull back and give you the 50,000 foot view and kind of drill down a little bit further into some of the specifics of it. But I walked away with just this general sense of frustration that I, as an independent YouTuber, seem to have more journalistic integrity than much of the mainstream media. It's really frustrating that I do the vast majority of this podcast on my own. Editing, producing. I have some really phenomenal help in sourcing stories, but by and large, it's up to me to try to curate these stories and to try to form them and to try to then produce them into coherent ideas on this podcast. And I have to try to source and back up what I'm saying as much as I possibly can. But then to watch this documentary about Hillsong. And by the way, if I didn't mention at the beginning, this is the second Hillsong documentary since this Carl Lentz thing was happening. This is called The Secrets of Hillsong. And to watch this documentary was really frustrating to hear all these baseless accusations thrown out against the church and that church in particular, but more broadly the church, to hear it thrown out without the kind of sourcing and backing that is necessary for the kinds of accusations that were being made. It is really frustrating to watch that. So let me give you a for instance so I don't do exactly what the people in this documentary did. Let me give you some examples of exactly how this took place. So for instance, we are told that Hillsong is a Pentecostal church, which is true, and that Pentecostals are somehow strangely and innately political. And that is because Pentecostals are largely, if not entirely, pro-life, and that makes them political, not makes them people that don't believe in murder. And then the fact that 80% of evangelicals voted for Trump, so that means that Pentecostals are deeply political. So there's a lot you could say about that, but suffice to say, just because somebody doesn't believe that you should murder a child doesn't necessarily make them political. And the fact that they voted for Trump might actually have something to do with that. So there's no nuance given to this assertion that Pentecostals are innately political. There's some right-wing extremist group is kind of the intention here. There's no nuance given to it in this sense, that the reason people voted for Trump, by and large, was because he said something crazy. He said that he would install conservative judges that would overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, was he right about that? I'll let you answer that for yourself. Not to mention, he was going up against the most radical pro-choice, pro-abort candidate, probably in the history of my lifetime, if not ever, Hillary Clinton. So when people voted for Trump, it wasn't because they were the pro-MAGA insurrection party. It was because they cared about life. And that seems to be a pretty good issue to vote upon. If there is an issue that we should be voting on as it concerns conservatism as an evangelical, you would think to yourself, murder is probably a pretty good one. So it goes even further than blaming Pentecostals for being innately political, but it also says that the working conditions at Hillsong were basically sweatshop style conditions. So there's a point in the documentary where some of the Hillsong musicians, and of course, if you know anything about Hillsong, you know that music has really created the buzz and the momentum that Hillsong has. And so there's a piece where musicians come out and they share their plight of only having a day rate of $180 a day when they went to go play for Carl and other people at Hillsong. Well, unfortunately, I have basic math skills. It was one of the few things that I got from the wonderful public school education system. I have basic math skills. So I went in and plugged in the day rate for these Hillsong musicians. And essentially, anybody that was playing daily and getting that day rate from Hillsong would be making about $45,000 a year. Now, that's no great shakes, but it's not like Oliver Twist here. It's not the sweatshop. $45,000 a year is an okay living in most cities and states in America. And by the way, $45,000 a year for playing a guitar is actually pretty good in my estimation. Now, you can probably fill in the blanks with the next couple of things that were illustrated by the documentary. Of course, we get the constant and incessant LGBTQ whining about the church. Now, get ready, put your seatbelts on, because June is going to be filled with it. But before we even get there, you get the Pride Parade on the Secrets of Hillsong, as we see a guy named Josh Canfield, who is actually employed, I believe, by Hillsong and was one of their singers, and who is a out homosexual. And he said this. This will give you kind of a flavor for what kind of accusations were being thrown at Hillsong and more broadly the Christian movement. He said this: "My dad would deliver his sermon. He would say that homosexuality is equal to murder." Now, you just have to stop there real quick and ask a question. Did your dad really say that? Forgive me, I'm going to cry foul. I've been in the Christian church for about 22 years now, and I can count on one hand how many times I've heard people equate homosexuality to murder. You're going to have to try to square that circle for me and help me understand how that even makes sense. So forgive me, color me skeptical, but I think Josh is actually just flat out lying to us. Now, even if that were true, even if his dad preached that homosexuality is tantamount to murder, again, it boggles the mind how that's true. Homosexuality is many things. Murder, I don't get. But nonetheless, if this sermon scarred your life, and your dad really did preach this sermon, I just got to tell you, Josh, as an adult man, that's on you. You shouldn't let sermons scar your life. There's a thing called YouTube, and you can find a million different sermons. And in fact, you could find a bunch of ones that affirm your sexual preferences if you wanted to. So the fact that scarred your life is not some kind of indictment against the Christian church. It's more an indictment of you. If that scarred you, I'd love to know what you think about this. The thing that might scar you is the obvious way in which nature condemns your sexual preference, the way in which nature testifies that perhaps you were created to be with a woman. So why do homosexuals pretend to be shocked by Christian belief when nature testifies of it, but then more importantly, when Christians have believed these things for thousands of years? We're told in this next kind of line of reasoning, which you can probably guess what will come next. After you get the LGBTQ whining, you get the racial grievances. In this next kind of line of reasoning, we're told that the Christian church is just 2 steps behind everything, and that we should have forced equity policies that show diversity. There is no real standard behind any of that. There is no quantifiable way to truly judge diversity. In other words, how diverse is diverse enough? Do you need like 15 black people for every 2 white people? Or how many Hispanics? How many Asians are we supposed to have in there? I know that they come up with these arbitrary standards about what it's supposed to look like, but the whole idea of equity at the end of the day is not a real policy. It's a totally artificial in its making. So diversity and the cry for diversity is nothing more than a postmodernist, neo-Marxist attempt to try to claim some social justice notoriety for yourself rather than it is to actually make real change. What we should all desire for is equality of opportunity and not equality of outcome. That will provide us the opportunity to put the people who are best skilled in the right positions where they need to be. I am less concerned about the color of skin of the people on stage than I am making sure that each and every person had an equal opportunity to vie for the position that they're in. Besides, I remember famous black intellectual, since we want to be intersectional here and claim identity every which way we possibly can, if it helps you to know that a black man said this, Thomas Sowell said, "What is your fair share of what you did not earn?" The point is that if you really want things to be fair, and if you really want a world that is best suited for black people and white people, then you don't want diversity quotas. You don't want equity. You want equality. Because you want your position because you rightfully earned it, not because of the color of your skin. You want to stand up on that stage with the pride and the acknowledgement that you deserve to be up there because of who you are and because you earned it. That is the way to truly humanize people, not diversity quotas and equity quotas. Everyone should want to rightfully earn a position, not have it granted to them by the dint of their skin color. Regardless, that's all in episode 1, guys. And then in episode 2, we finally get to hear from Carl and Laura Lentz about the aftermath of being exposed, for Carl being exposed for his affairs. And this is what we get. I didn't know, actually, that Carl had cheated on his wife twice, not only with the girl that was widely publicized by the New York Post and other places, this girl that he met in Central Park, I believe, but also his live-in nanny. Now, some of you may have been familiar with that story, but I was not. And I just came away thinking, they were talking about the fact that this woman, this live-in nanny with them, has her own children, that she lives in Boston or lived in Boston at the time and was taking time away from her family even during Christmas and stuff to spend time with the Lentzes rather than being with her own family. And I'm just thinking to myself, you people you lack the kind of common sense for me to ever take you seriously. Carl was kind of like that in his preaching too, but nonetheless. So Carl cheated on his wife twice, live-in nanny and this girl in Central Park. And the aftermath is Carl takes the blame, and he actually comes out and posts on social media that he's to blame, and really does do, I think, a relatively healthy job of acknowledging his role in all of this stuff. But then let a little time settle in, and you get Carl Lentz taking the time to kind of really work on his story. And you get this, that it is Brian Houston's fault, the fact that he was sexually abused as a kid, and he has some mental health issues, and this is why he cheated on his wife twice. We get none of the fact that celebrity culture and churches are not really, they don't really work well together. We get none of the fact that Carl was intoxicated with his own fame and stardom. We get none of that nuanced, thoughtful conversation. We get everybody else is to blame, and I can't believe how they treated us after you treated your wife in this despicable way, and then continue to parade your wife on national, international television while she weeps her heart out because of your foolishness. And the whole time, he still doesn't truly take accountability for himself throughout all of episode 2. Now, I know I'm taking a little bit of time here, but I think this is incredibly important for you to see, whether you care about Hillsong or Carl Lentz or anything else. Because the most important takeaway for me, perhaps from this whole documentary, is just simply this. Carl Lentz is being used as a tool. If anything, this documentary proves that the modern American left does not actually have a moral code. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is as close as they can get, and it all goes down in flames the moment they get one opportunity to tear down the church. They are all too happy to platform a narcissist, white, male, cisgender sexual abuser as long as it does something more important for them, which is to tear down their first hatred, the church. Any institution that actually has morals must be destroyed by these people because it is a constant reminder of their own hypocrisy. They know that they can't truly ground any of their moral beliefs in a logical framework that actually makes sense. And so the one institution that can, the one place that can actually provide a logical and coherent basis for moral values, the church, must be destroyed so that their own hypocrisy is not displayed. I can only imagine that's why these documentary filmmakers wanted to take a story that could have been really, really well done, could have been very thoughtful, and could have been very introspective, and totally destroy that opportunity. They could have looked at Carl Lentz. They could have looked at narcissism and the way in which we love to gaze at our own appearance. But then that would be too close to what the left actually endorses and preaches on a regular basis. Rather, they have to do the one thing, the tired, the hackneyed, the sick thing that the left loves to do, which is tear the church down. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.